When it gets to the top of the hill, just can't stop and admire the view. Always got to have something new. The human brain's an intelligent fool. Build you a hospital, build you a school. You wake up the very next day, the progress train took it all away. The progress train can demolish your town, selling us heaven when we're hellbound. When we're hellbound, they'd buy apathy, driven by greed. Always running at top speed, going so fast, you won't notice it till it's past. Doesn't give a damn about yesterday when you forget what it took away. You'll know the progress train roll right over you. Juggernaut hurtling down the road, you're not in control, you're part of the load. Running the lights won't slow down, get in its way and it'll run you down. The progress train is on a one-way track, take you there, won't bring you back. And when you start singing, I'm alright, Jack, I'm alright, Jack, I'm alright, Jack, you'll know the progress train ran right into you. The girl in the red shoes had to dance, the progress train has to advance. Tables to turn, money to earn, bridges to burn. We never learn, got no destination, it'll go anywhere. Doesn't even know when it's got there. Got no beginning, got no end. Doesn't even care what's around the bend. Got to grow, got to change, build up, tear down, rearrange. Got to move on, dirty or clean. It's an atom bomb, it's a washing machine, it's a love song. It sings, seducing you with things that ease your heart and please your mind. The passengers sleep and the driver's blind. A fire in his pants, he don't dance, no romance. They want you now, they want you now, they want you now, and they'll have you now. That's the progress train, and it's right over you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's meeting. Just quickly before we get started, Danny's going to put up a slide here, and we're going to just go through some Zoom tips for this evening. And while you're waiting, feel free to use the chat box and introduce yourself. Let us know where you're joining from, when you joined us here tonight. All right, so first thing is that tonight's meeting does have closed captions. And so you'll be able to turn those on by clicking that button right here that says live transcript. The other thing is that you have muted tonight so that we're able to hear the speakers, but we really do want to hear from you. So please use the chat box if you have any questions at all or any comments to add to. We love seeing them in the chat box, and we'll make sure the speakers can see those questions. If you do have questions and you're joining over the phone, you can email your questions to myself at megan@wellingtonwaterwatchers.ca. Or if you require any tech support at all throughout the meeting, you can find me in the chat box and ask a question, or email me at that email. And from me tonight, so I'm going to pass it over to Melissa now. Have a wonderful meeting.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited for everyone to be together again. I know it's been a few weeks, but it's really great to have everyone here again. I'm excited to hear what everyone has to say. My part tonight is mostly just to give the community a huge congratulations for the Toronto Star article by Noor Javed that was published in today's paper. Lots of great things were in that article. Many people contributed to that. So big congratulations. That's a huge win. That's in front of a ton of people being in that publication. So way to go. And I'm going to hand it, I think, to Mike from now.
Thanks, Melissa. My name is Mike Balquill. I'm the campaign director with the Wellington Water Watchers, and I'm going to be the facilitator for tonight's evening. There's the agenda. Tonight's meeting is a series of updates. In a moment after myself, Mike Sullivan from Get Concerned is going to speak, and he's going to speak to the issue of some letters that have been unearthed and some issues around that. There'll be a question and answer period after that. As Melissa has said, please enter your questions into the chat box, and then we'll ask them, pose them to Mike after his presentation. And then we have a series of community speakers. Lorena McKennett will be first from Wise Communities, then Ann Carbert, Emily from Climate Momentum, Emily Chandler from the Energy and Environment Committee, Jeff Love, who's calling himself Keep Stratford Cool and has something cool to show you if you haven't seen it already. Tori Sutton, let's show them who we are. You'll remember from previous meetings about a video that she's assembling based on videos you're sending her, but your comments on the glass plant. And then Leslie Walker, she and Peggy Coffey are coordinating the every day in the cold vigil at City Hall. Big round of warm applause for them throughout the night to keep them going down there. Then we'll talk a little bit about next steps with some closing comments. Sharon Collingwood is going to speak a bit about the history of Stratford working together to protect the community. And then that's going to be our meeting. Like I always like to say at these, when I'm at a meeting, is hands up if you think we're at the same meeting. This is the agenda you're expecting. Okay, so with that, I'm going to ask Mike Sullivan to turn on his microphone and his video. Take it away, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Since we last spoke, a fellow named of Dan Graver managed through a Freedom of Information request to get some, but not all, of the correspondence between the city officials, mostly the mayor, and the government concerning the annexation of the land and the ministerial zoning order. And there are some interesting pieces in those letters that I'd like to point out to you. Next slide, please. Maybe, there it is. Okay, now I apologize if it's hard to read because I'm putting a whole letter on one page, but the first letter, and this was one of the ones that was unearthed by the newspaper a couple of months ago, is from Dan Matheson to the Honorable Steve Clark, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And in it, we learn that at some point before November 20th, the mayor had, or the city had signed a letter of intent with Xinyi, and he asks for a ministerial zoning order, including addressing the issue of official plan conformity. Well, that's important because if there had been a planning process, one of the things that the town would have had to do is make sure that it met with the official plan. As far as we can tell, the ministerial zoning order has got no attempt to conform with Stratford's official plan. He gives a deadline of November 30th and would like a ministerial zoning order by then. He indicates in the letter that it's not just the city of Stratford, but Perth County and the township of Perth South that are asking for this ministerial zoning order. And for those of you who remember 2018, because this was November 20th, 2018, the names at the bottom of the letter are the old council. So this letter was written after the election in 2018 to elect a new council, but before they were sworn in. So the letterhead still has the old council on it. So, and the decisions, if we could ever find them, to request an MZO and to sign the letter of intent with Xinyi apparently were made by the old council. Next slide, please. this is one of the letters that was unearthed by Dan Graver. And it is a letter from the Deputy Minister, Laurie LeBlanc, remember that name, who had assured the mayor that she would be recommending to the minister that a minister's zoning order be considered in this case. The rest of the letter is just recanting what he'd said. And she said she had spoken to the minister and have confident that he will give his full consideration and attention to this matter. Next slide, please. And then from November 27th until February 18th, apparently nobody said anything to anybody, at least not in writing. The February 18th letter is one that's referred to in one of the letters from the ministry, but we don't have a copy of it. And so it's one of the ones that the city did not give to Dan Graver, although he asked for everything. Next slide, please. The next time we hear anything is on March the 9th of 2020. And this refers back to the February 18th letter. And it says that under Section 47 of the Planning Act, the minister has sole discretion to make a ministerial zoning order, and the minister has considered this matter and is not prepared to exercise his authority to make an MZO in this case. And then she goes on to say, in the fourth paragraph down, I would point you to the local land use planning processes that are available to your municipality under the Planning Act as you consider your next steps in the project you are pursuing. She also notes that this ministry has received the city's restructuring proposal that has to do with the annexation of the farmland and is carefully considering it. They would be pleased to have further discussions with you on this matter. And this is addressed to Dan Matheson with copies to the warden of Perth County and the mayor of the township of Perth South. So on March the 9th, 2020, the ministry turns down the MZO request. And this is a letter we hadn't seen before. The next letter we had seen before, next page, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. Is dated March 11th. And I suspect that Mayor Matheson, who wrote this letter, had not yet seen the turn down. It's basically a generic letter saying we want to your assistance in obtaining a ministerial zoning order, including addressing the issue of official plan conformity. And there's a bunch of other references throughout the letter, but essentially it's a reiteration of the request to ask for a ministerial zoning order. Next slide, please. On March the 12th, the mayor writes again. So he's written on the 11th. This is 2020 now, so we're 2 years after they started looking. And he, again, writes very disappointed and extremely frustrated with a recent letter I received from your deputy minister, Kate Manson-Smith, declining to proceed with the ministerial zoning order requested by the city of Stratford, the township of Perth South, and the county of Perth, along with Sheen Glass of Canada. So it's now clear that Sheen Glass itself is asking for the ministerial zoning order. That wasn't really clear in any of the other letters, but here it is in black and white. And now he says that there is a letter dated November 27th received. He refers back to the letter that was sent from the previous deputy minister, who he now calls Laurie LaBelle. Her name is actually Laurie LaBelle, and or LeBlanc, sorry, Laurie LeBlanc. so he didn't get her name right. He refers back to that and said, look, she said she was going to give it to us, and now you're not giving it to us, and we're upset. And there's time constraints, and it's a critical time, and so on and so forth. He, along with Mayor Wilhelm and Warden Atchison, request an urgent meeting with you and the Premier. So now he's brought the Premier into play to discuss the ministry's decision to deny our joint request. And then it is copied to Premier Rob Ford. Those of you who know, Rob Ford was the mayor of Toronto and never the Premier. It's Doug Ford who is the Premier. So that's on March 12th. On March 23rd, so 11 days later, and I assume that there were conversations between various players between March 12th and March 23rd. This is now a letter to the new Deputy Minister, Kate Manson-Smith, and it is a letter that is on pasted up letterhead. It's a manufactured letterhead from the three heads of government of the Township of Perth South and the County of Perth. And this refers to the fact that Minister Clark has denied the minister's zoning order. And then, very interestingly, this letter doesn't ask for a ministerial zoning order. So now Mayor Matheson wrote on March 12th, said, I want a ministerial zoning order. And then on March 23rd, together with the other two heads of council for the other two organizations, they don't ask for a ministerial zoning order. They ask to make sure that the annexation goes through. And so the county, township, and city feel that the restructuring proposal is required for the continued economic growth and well-being of the area. And we are writing to confirm that in the absence of the issuance of a minister's zoning order for the annexation lands are committed to proceeding with the restructuring proposal. So they're just saying, look, we still want to, even if you're not going to give us a ministerial zoning order, please make sure we can annex the farmland into Stratford. And we respectfully request that the restructuring proposal submitted on February 24th, again, we don't have a copy of that, be approved as soon as reasonably possible. And it's signed by Mayor Matheson, Warden Atchison, and Mayor Wilhelm of the Township of Perth South. So again, the mayor has, the interesting part of this letter is that once the mayor wrote on March the 12th, it was, please, 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 we need an MZO. Now he's writing on March 23rd with the other two heads of council, and they're not asking for an MZO. Next slide, please. Then there's another letter on April 9th, 2020. And again, we don't have that letter. That one wasn't one of the ones that came through from the Freedom of Information request. Next slide, please. But it's referred to in this letter. So in this letter, which is only from Mayor Matheson, it's not from the other heads of council, it is demanding the MZO. It's basically seeing that there was a letter on April 9th that rejected the ministerial zoning order. So now he's been turned down twice. And in this letter, he, for the first time, suggests that there will be 1,685 direct jobs and 4,212 indirect jobs. I'm not sure where those numbers come from. There's no justification anywhere for that. However, one of the things that he did in this letter was to reduce the size of the land that he wanted the minister to put an MZO on to only the parcel that was west of Highway 7 and south of Line 29, or south and west of those two intersections, not the other pieces of land that were originally being sought. In addition, at the end of this letter, he points out that absent the MZO, in other words, if we don't get an MZO, we expect that Xinyi will pursue its development in another location outside of the province of Ontario and likely outside of Canada. So the mayor has now leveled a threat to the minister, saying, I assume on good authority, but I'm not party to the conversations he had with Xinyi, that if they didn't get the MZO, they would not be able to convince Xinyi to stay. That said, if you'll recall, in at least one of the letters back to the mayors, it was, please start your planning process. Use the planning process to rezone this land. But they didn't even start it, as we all know, because there was no public knowledge of this until the end of October of that year. So there are some missing pieces, but that's what we now know. And we're awaiting other pieces because we have asked through a Freedom of Information request to the city that we're waiting for a return on for everything ever written or said or done between that had to do with Xinyi. And we haven't had any of it yet. But when we do, we'll let you know. So that's my little spiel. Sorry if I went too long. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for your little spiel. And as usual, it's very informative. And I know you said this at the beginning, but we just need to say it again, that the information was brought to you by a number of sources. Dan Graver did some digging. Other people are sending us interesting information all the time. You're doing digging, Mike. Members of the steering committee are, and you're synthesizing and presenting it to us in a very clear way. So thank you for presenting it, for your digging you do, and thank you everybody for the work you're doing and the information you're bringing forward, particularly Dan Graver. Now, Mike, there's a couple questions here. One question is, was there a reply to the March 23rd letter? I think you're muted, Mike.
Yes. It would appear that the April 9th letter is the reply, that there was a letter on April 9th, which we don't have, that turned down the MZO. I don't know, because the March 23rd letter didn't talk about an MZO. It talked about making sure that the annexation proposal would go through. And we've not seen anything that specifically talked about it. The April 9th letter probably said that we're still considering it, but without seeing it, I can't tell you.
Mike, there's lots of comments in the box, chat box, appreciating you, appreciating Dan. Somebody's calling you Sherlock if you're looking for a new nickname. But Margaret Thompson asks a question that I think maybe is the question we all want to know, which is, what are the broader implications of this? What are your takeaways? What do you see as the broader implications of this correspondence?
It would appear to me that the minister was reluctant to use the ministerial zoning order in this case. I'm not sure why he was reluctant, and this, as far back as the fall of 2018, this was being asked for, and I don't believe he issued any prior to that first ask. So maybe it was just something that what he understood and his deputies said, this is not something we normally do except in very unique circumstances, which, for example, is on land that has no town council looking after it, or in cases where it absolutely is necessary. This was not one of those. So that's one of the takeaways. Another of the takeaways is that the heads of the other two councils were not in favor or were not pushing an MZO. They just wanted to make sure that the annexation took place. And as we know, Perth South is looking forward to the revenue from a industrial zoning on land that they will continue to receive property taxes because of the deal that was cut between the city of Stratford and Perth South. The township of Perth South will continue to receive significant revenues, and that's very important to them, that the land be zoned industrial so they can get those revenues.
Mike, I think we just have one more question for you, which is, who signed the last letter?
The one from the mayor, it was just the mayor, Dan Matheson. It was on city letterhead with all the new councilors on it, but it was the April, can't remember which date, I think it's April 16th letter, is just from the mayor.
Jane Showman, who's asking this question, excuse me, is saying, but it's not his name. So I don't have a letter in front of me, so I'm not quite sure what she's drawing our attention to.
Daniel B. Matheson is who I see written on the thing, but I'm not sure what letter she's seeing that wasn't signed by somebody else.
Okay, so Jane, we may not be able to sort this out online here, but if you want to send us a question to the Get Concerned email with, I don't know if you've got a copy of the letter you're looking at right now, we'll try and sort this out. Jack McDonald is saying his signature looks different. Maybe it's a question about whether the handwriting, this maybe I think is what the question is. Yeah, several people are saying the actual physical signature is different than earlier letters. So we can't.
I'm not a handwriting expert. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, we'd have to get Watson involved. Sherlock's not enough, I think, for that one. Okay, so thank you, Mike. In a moment, we're going to go to Lorena, but Mike, I understand you have some personal obligations, family celebration.
Yes, thank you. I'll listen for a few more minutes and then I have to take off.
Okay, so welcome, Lorena. You got to turn your microphone on. There you go.
Great. Well, thank you, Mike, and good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Leslie and Peggy and Kathy and Manfred and any of the others who've held the vigil at City Hall these cold weeks of winter and during this hiatus, and giving this issue continued visibility and informing other citizens about the seriousness of this proposal. I'd also like to thank all the folks at Get Concerned Stratford, of course, for hosting this evening's meeting, and the various others who have played and continue to play a very important role in bringing forward critical information, such as we've heard tonight, which fleshes out our understanding of what has transpired and by whom and how we got here. While it's been a relief of sorts to not be leaning against this wheel quite as hard as we had been at Wise Communities here, there's hardly been a day that we've not discussed, studied, or addressed this subject. And in the fullness of time, we look forward to bringing to the citizens of this community a narrative which will stitch things together. It may not be the raid on the Capitol, but the documents we've been able to review do tell a compelling story, and certainly we've heard some of that tonight from Mike. In reflecting on where we might be at with respect to Council's decision on this subject, well, it could very well be that they will take it up once again after this lockdown is lifted. And all we have is the promise that they will give us at least 7 days notice before any significant event, a vote. But in the meantime, while things remain unclear, we plan to resume our rallies as of Monday, February 22nd, and that will be undertaken in accordance to the COVID guidelines of the day. And if we need to set the shoes back out while they're ready to go, they're still in my van. We will update folks with those details through our Wise Communities mailing list. So if anyone isn't on it yet, be sure to sign up. And with respect to the Civic and Improvement Initiative, we continue to move ahead with this and look forward to updating folks when it's slightly more congealed. And that's it.
Thank you, Lorena, and thank you for your continued leadership. we're very pleased that we have representatives from additional community groups tonight and are going to speak with a climate focus. I'm not going to preempt anybody's comments, but we're going to start with Ann Carbert from Climate Momentum. And again, as we're going through, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. And Lorena, I know that you have to slip away as well for personal engagement, but I hope you have a chance to look in the chat box and see all the appreciation for you and your work before you go. So Ann, I'm hoping you can turn on your mic and your video, and we'll turn the podium over to you.
Yes, excellent. Thanks very much. I am with Climate Momentum, and that's a local network and information hub, a connector for climate awareness and action. And we're focused on climate change in the big picture and what needs to start now to combat climate change locally. So we started with a blog that was Earth Day, April 2019. That blog some story about activities that are happening now in Stratford, success stories, examples, climate champions. We added some pub mixers to get people together locally. And because of the timing, you will remember that we all learned about Greta Thunberg kind of early 2019 and throughout. And we quickly moved to coordinating logistics with students and an intergenerational team that came together for the first International Day of Action for Fridays for Future. So that was back in September 2019. And it was a big day of local action. I hope many of you were there. We have a 4-minute video that's pretty catchy and a nice summary of the day. But there was a march from the high schools up in that end of town of about 100 students going down the sidewalk to Market Square, and a rally there in Market Square that was probably about 300 people with speakers, again, student speakers and some others, some music and information tents. So some of you may have been there with community groups, connecting with people and finding that it was a responsive crowd. I certainly know, you put an info table some places and people really aren't that interested, but this was a crowd of people who had made a point to be there for this global day of action. So that was a real motivator. That was, as I say, the fall of 2019. Then we moved into supporting the climate emergency motion at council, which came up earlier the following year. And we continued to keep information flowing and make connections. And I just realized yesterday that in Climate Momentum's existence as a hub and as a website and network of volunteers, we are just passing the halfway mark, where we will have soon existed longer in the pandemic than before the pandemic. 11 months until mid-March last year. It's now 11 months that we're in the pandemic. And I mention this to acknowledge this challenge and offer thanks to all those who've helped to keep things going while it has been much harder to connect and build community than it used to be. But we are starting efforts to build more community, and we want to keep communicating the importance of climate awareness and action locally. We are hosting a virtual community meeting on the climate emergency next Thursday evening, a week from today, the 18th at 7 p.m. Same time, same day of the week, so hopefully most of you are free. We'd love for all of you to attend and invite your friends and family and neighbors. I'll get to a few more details about that right before I wrap up, but I would like to take some time to share some background about the local climate emergency advocacy that's been happening, feeling that it might provide some context for the efforts to oppose this glass factory. So as many of you know, Stratford City Council passed a motion declaring a climate emergency on February 10th of last year, so just a year ago now. And at that big Fridays for Future rally in September 2019 in Market Square, Anne-Marie Reimer, a grandmother and retired teacher, put out a petition and got about 200 signatures to call on council to declare a climate emergency. That's that receptive audience I was talking about. If you can get 200 signatures in one info tabling event, that's pretty fabulous. So she went into City Hall with some students that afternoon. And that petition got the ball rolling for the motion to be put forward to council to declare a Stratford climate emergency. And the Energy and Environment Committee and a few others provided some suggestions for the text. And a few of us presented at the council meeting, with high school students, Rachel Steffen and Emily Adam, being the most powerful in their message to counselors. And there's a video of that that's accessible lately on our social media. We've been sharing again and on our webpage. So just to provide a little more detail about this context, a very short excerpt of the climate emergency declaration that was passed by City Council states, whereas recent international research has indicated a need for massive reduction in carbon emissions in the next 10 years to avoid further and devastating economic, ecological, and societal loss. Whereas the climate in Canada is warming at twice the rate of the rest of the world, as per Canada's Changing Climate Report. And then the declaration ends with, therefore, a climate emergency be declared by the City of Stratford for the purposes of naming, framing, and deepening our commitment to protecting our economy, our ecosystems, and our community from climate change. So this is intended to be an acknowledgement of where we're at. The climate emergency is a real emergency. And this is a hard reality, and it hits us in different ways on different days, but we all need to be learning more about this, staying informed, doing our best to manage our eco-anxiety and to communicate clearly with others in our community. Diane Sachs, who many of you may know is the former Environmental Commissioner for Ontario, likes to use this 10-word phrase, originally from Dr. Ed Maybach, to communicate the climate crisis. It's real, it's us, experts agree, it's bad, there's hope. And while we have lost a lot of time in the last few decades with ineffectual global and national action, and the window for a gradual response has now closed, the changes ahead for a greener and more equitable society at all levels, including our local level, offer some amazing opportunities. And we must keep our eye on the many positive possibilities in taking climate action together. Most important of all, we will be working to ensure the health and longevity of today's children and youth and of future generations. So there is hope in municipal action. Communities are where the people are. This is where we live. And there is energy and action together that builds hope and solidarity. The federal government can't reach its climate goals without municipalities making change. And municipalities can't make change without citizens and leaders on board. So we all need to be supporting each other to explore and to find our place in climate action, and to talk about what the emergency means for you, for me, and for the city. What does it mean to take the climate emergency seriously? So the climate emergency declaration motion also, there was an additional motion at the same time that council passed that indicated that city staff was to report back to the Infrastructure, Transportation, and Safety Committee, which is a council committee, within 3 months with targets and proposed actions. So there have been delays on action. That 3 months would have been May 2020. Some of those delays are understandable given what 2020 handed us. Others are frustrating. Of course, the pandemic had an impact on city staffing, and I'm not quite sure how these decisions were made, but the climate emergency response was put on the paused project list when city work had to be reduced. So that was last spring, and it wasn't moved back to the active projects list until there was full staffing in the clerk's office, and that was late August or last September. The greenhouse gas emissions count. That was a report prepared by our Perth County Climate Change Coordinator, who is shared by the county and all the townships, Stratford and St. Mary's. She works for the whole county to develop a climate plan, and she did greenhouse gas emissions count for each municipality. Her name is Rebecca Garlick, you may know. She submitted that count to the City of Stratford in December of 2019. And that report didn't surface at all last year to be presented to council or made public. But there is indication that she might be on council's agenda on February 22nd to present that emissions profile, as she calls it, of Stratford. We had indications that she would present to council last October and November, and those didn't come to be. There have been efforts to coordinate 2 plans for Stratford with content from Rebecca, the climate change coordinator for the county. And that's a community plan for Stratford. And also a plan from city staff looking more at corporate emissions and what the city could do. And that coordination at times has been muddled, and but it has been the stated reason for delaying her presentations last fall, that they wanted to be able to present a lot of information, and not all of the city information was ready, even though Rebecca at any time has been ready to present updates on the work she's been doing since she started in 2019. And certainly she's been available to our network, and we have a video on our webpage of a presentation she gave to us in July, just updating us on what she was doing and the purpose of it and where she was. But we also know that the focus turned in late October and November to the Gigny controversy. And I don't think the contradiction in passing a climate action plan at the same time as possibly approving this massive factory is lost on any of the councillors. Some are very concerned about it for this and other reasons, and oppose the plant. And other councillors, I think, are rationalizing that the climate impact is not a very real concern. There has also been, and you may have seen some reports in the paper focused more on Perth County lately, but there has been what I think of as very last minute discussion of extending the climate change coordinator's contract to the end of this year. Her contract was to finish this month, and these budget discussions were happening. So there are claims from some of the townships and from the county council that they didn't have enough information on the work that she's done over the last 2 years. I think myself, that's a bit of a discouraging sign that coordinating our climate plan and ensuring a proper information flow hasn't been a priority. I've certainly found her interesting to hear from, but I know she wasn't invited by many councils to present the work that she's done. So that's a bit of an update on recent news around the climate emergency. Now, what's coming up? What do we need to keep in mind, from my opinion anyway? We expect that Rebecca Garlick will present that greenhouse gas emissions count to the City Council meeting on February 22nd, and those are Monday afternoon meetings. We can all attend those over Zoom or watch on Facebook Live. So staying connected and interested in that, showing some interest there, posting some comments on the Facebook stream while that meeting happens is probably a good idea. She will also likely update council on the public consultation that she did late last year and the survey results there. The local climate plan, this being somehow, we will see, 2 pieces from Rebecca and from city staff, will be coming forward to council probably March 8th or 22nd. There's a small chance that it could be pushed for February, but I did have a meeting with some other climate activists with the mayor today, and it seems to look more likely that this will be March. So again, we want to pay attention to that. The climate plan will recommend action and address the sources of greenhouse gas emissions in our community as they are now. So looking at transportation, solid waste, residential emissions, some industrial, commercial, and institutional emissions possibly as well. So we need to be aware that we want to stop the Gigny plant, plus we want to really get started on a coordinated climate plan and climate action as a community. So we need to support a strong climate plan at council and support the councillors who are in favor of this, so that the city will commit us to doing our part this decade. We really are on a short timeline to significantly reduce emissions by 2030. And some of our Climate Momentum volunteers are organizing to have citizen delegates speak at the council meeting when the plan comes forward. And we will want to emphasize the importance of ambitious targets and timelines, public participation, and having an explicit climate lens on all city decisions. So together, we need to ask council to approve a strong plan. And I think that means also watching out for the cynicism that comes up, because we are quite aware of the contradiction here with the Genie proposal. It will help to be clear to council that we are ready to do our part as citizens to support the climate plan, share the information, get others on board. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And also in the Genie context, we need to demand the answers about the greenhouse gas emissions, the direct question that has been asked. And we need to question the arguments about the benefits of local supply chains, or what they are putting forward as likely benefits of local supply chains. Our local climate plan will be based on this Stratford greenhouse gas emissions count. And our reduction target will be related to that count in terms of that percentage that we will want to try to achieve by 2030. Genie would rather we focus on climate change as an issue for global action, and trust that creating a local supply chain for float glass will result in significant greenhouse gas reductions elsewhere by eliminating more remote supply chains. But who measures that? And I don't know many companies that lose clients and don't try to find others. So we really do need to focus on our local count and working to reduce that. And it's too late to be building new industries that are fossil fuel intensive like this. We've been doing that for years. That's business as usual that's gotten us here. And no matter what they say about the possibility of solar panels, the Genie proposal is not in any way cutting edge for greenhouse gas mitigation or offsets. So we need to be ready for this onshoring supply chain argument that attempts to disconnect Genie's greenhouse gas emissions from our local emissions count and from how we're going about our climate plan to reduce our local emissions. And again, keeping in mind, at the same time that we push back on that, we need to ensure a strong climate plan that focuses on reductions in our current major emissions sources. I'm not sure how many of you are aware that together, transportation, solid waste, and building emissions add up to almost 80% of the sources of greenhouse gas in our community right now. So that's, you know, in large part, our personal vehicles, the waste we produce, and our homes, as well as some community buildings. So we need to be ready to get on board with action for that. And as a last point, we also need to watch for other climate-related and environment-related council decisions. It's not always easy to keep track, but there have been some positive movements, and we need to show our support. There are always vocal objections for any decisions that will cost more. Environmental decisions themselves sometimes often generate negative responses. We have the recent example of the Argyle Street reconstruction work that needs to be done there, council decision to prioritize attempting to protect some mature trees, and that costing an extra $150,000. You can guess who council is hearing from about that decision. The renewable natural gas conversion of the wastewater treatment plant is not widely understood as a climate solution either. So there are things like that where we can engage, get more information, and offer council some support for climate-friendly and environment-friendly decisions. One example, there are often things that are under the radar too. We published a blog in 2019 on the green roof and energy-saving features of the Dufferin Arena. Who knew the Dufferin Arena had a green roof? I didn't. But there are some things like that happening around the city that are good examples that we can offer some support for and ask for those kinds of measures to be expanded. And so our climate emergency community meeting next week on Thursday night, the 18th at 7 p.m. will focus on some positive energy, on the possible low carbon future for Stratford. And we'll have some discussion of activities that are happening now and our desired vision for climate action this year and leading to 2030. Some of our local youth climate activists will open the event. We'll have updates from the Perth County Climate Change Coordinator, the Energy and Environment Committee, and from the city's Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee, which is getting organized to monitor the progress of our climate plan. And as a guest speaker, we will welcome Mayor David Mayberry, who will offer examples of ambitious actions that are happening just close by in our neighboring Oxford County. So we would like all of you to attend this virtual event to help us spread the word. It's short notice for a number of reasons, but we do have over 70 people registered as of now. And we'd love for you to sign up too if you haven't already. And connecting with Climate Momentum is a way to stay up to date on these developments around the city and on how people are connecting together in our community to take action. So we do share news on our social media accounts and in our blog and in our email newsletters, so you can sign up for those as well. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne. I hope you'll see in a moment in the appreciation for all your hard work in the chat box. I've got a couple questions here that we're going to ask in the open session, and then there's a couple there that I think are very specific and technical that I'm going to ask you to answer through the chat box, either now or later. But the first question from Rochelle Schubert is, which councillors are for a strong environmental plan and which are against? She's asking you to name names here, Anne.
Well, I would say, you know, some of them are very involved through their committee work in efforts that are already working towards these things. So we have council representatives on the Energy and Environment Committee and on the Active Transportation Committee. So I get updates frequently, or am in touch with Jody Burbach and Kathy Vasilakos. But I don't think any of the councillors would tell you they're not in support of a climate plan. I think we do need to ask them about the strength of their commitment and what that means. As I say, there have been decisions before where there is a climate benefit to deciding in one direction. And it's wonderful that I think city staff hasn't always presented the more expensive but more environmental option. So it's wonderful that those are being presented to council, and that might be a bit of a shift in some cases. I think what we have to watch is some councillors are much more careful about spending, and they hear those complaints from other citizens about how are you using our tax dollars to save some mature trees when you could have done something else. Or I think they say they're in favor. The climate emergency declaration was passed unanimously. The motion to come up with targets and some concrete actions within 3 months from passing that plan, which went off track from the pandemic, but that motion also passed unanimously. I think there is support there. I think there is leverage there. But some of the stronger supporters are the ones that you see more active in environmental and climate activities in our city.
Thanks, Anne. I'm going to ask you in a moment, we're going to go to Emily Chandler, but when we switch over, I'm going to ask you if you'll answer Maureen's question in the chat box, which is how are emissions measured, ground level or at the top of a chimney? And there's also a question about the sewage plant bio program. Do you think that's a good thing? So I'm going to ask you to answer those in the chat box as we continue. Before we go to Emily, I want to answer Carol Easton's question. Were there satisfactory answers to the questions asked in any of the legal correspondence with City Hall? Was there an actual written response? And we're still waiting for an answer. We understand the letter responding to our questions is coming. It hasn't arrived yet. And earlier there were two questions that were asked that I want the, excuse me, the people who pose them to know we're going to answer before the night's over, which is a question around should we join forces with the people who are fighting MZOs in a couple of other communities like the Holland Marsh, etc. and what's our way out of the current situation? So though we have got those questions, but we're going to hold them till we get to the next steps part of the agenda. So thanks, Anne. Again, there's lots of appreciation for you in the chat box. So I hope you'll take that and rub it all over yourself for all your hard work and feel the good vibes from the people in the community. And Emily, I'm going to ask you to turn on your microphone and your video.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you for welcoming me into your living rooms. I feel like this is maybe a bit like what Peter Mansbridge or Mr. Dressup felt like. So I am the current chair of the Energy and Environment Committee. I believe this is my third year in that role. And we are one of several city advisory committees. We're made up of volunteers, but we also have 2 council representatives on the committee, that being Jody Burbach and Bonnie Henderson. And our mandate essentially is providing recommendations to the city, as well as education to the public about how to make our city more environmentally sustainable, for lack of a better phrase. In terms of Chigny, we have made 2 motions back when we first heard of the project that were essentially against the project as it stands. And we have also made motions recommending that they extend the climate coordinator's position that Anne was speaking about, as well as hire an additional environmental coordinator to lead the climate action plan when it is approved. On top of that, we always have several ongoing projects that happen each year and add new ones depending on the committee's interests. And one of the main ones is every year we do a new Avon River restoration project. So some of you may have seen this year's. It was last week during the most cold days that we were in partnership with the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority to put in crib walls along the North Shore. This doubled the project that we did 2 years ago. And crib walls, what they do is address the erosion that's happening around our entire river, provide fish and other species habitat, and also increase accessibility. So this section added a canoe and kayak launch. Brand new this year that I'm really excited about, we recognize that the city of Stratford obviously needs more trees for lots of reasons, including their impact on climate change. And so we're bringing a program called Tree Power to Stratford, which will provide 300 affordable trees to residents to plant on their private property. This is in partnership with Upper Thames and Festival Hydro. Festival Hydro has come on as a significant sponsor. Trees are going to be about $20 each, and the website for that will launch in March. I can put in the chat box, and we'll be handing those trees out in April. In addition, and kind of building on the education part, we have worked with organizations like the Stratford Perth Museum to install low impact development projects. So things like rain gardens. This year we're going to be at least starting, if not installing, a rain garden at the Stratford Skate Park as a way to control the water flow, as well as educate people that are there. Those skateboarders that are there can learn about LID projects. And we're also going to be having, normally we have public events, but of course this is a new world. So we are planning webinars, including one in June about invasive species. Going back to the climate action plan. So we've actually been contributing to it in coordination with the city. So a group of volunteers from Energy and Environment and not have worked on the community portion of the climate action plan, looking at short and long-term actions that we can take in those top 3 categories that Anne mentioned in terms of our GHG emissions. Those are waste, transportation, and residential. And what we were able to do is come up with those ideas and those targets, and then have it accepted by the Energy and Environment Committee so that it can then pass on to city staff, who, as I said, we've been working with, and he's working on the corporate side of this plan. So that is into the city. The clerk that we're working with at the city on that is Chris Bantock. And as Anne mentioned, we were hoping that that plan would come forward to council in February. Now we're hearing possibly March. But if and when the climate action plan is passed, there's also going to be a request coming to council that included in it is a quarterly reporting of progress to that ITS committee in collaboration with our Energy and Environment Committee, so that we can create an annual report card style infographic so that we can actually track and measure the progress that we're making on the climate action report, report that back to the community, and then adjust as needed. Because otherwise, as people have pointed out and as we've witnessed, it will just simply be a report that sits on the shelf and nothing gets done. So that is the update from the Energy and Environment Committee.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Emily. And Emily was in the waiting room with her daughter, Ruby, and we appreciated Ruby letting her mother come on and join the community night with everybody. There's lots of love for you and in the chat box, Emily. I'm not seeing any questions.
I'll take it.
So if you do see some follow-up questions in chat box, Emily, please answer them. But there's a lot of appreciation for your work. Next is Jeff Love, who's going to tell us how to keep Stratford cool. I think you were going to see a 1-minute video first. Is that right, Jeff? And then Jeff's going to speak. So to our producers behind the scenes, take it away, Jeff.
So we're doing the video first, I think. Here we go. So I'm Jeff, this is Jen.
Hi.
We've done this as a way of showing why the city should resist the Jingyi plant. What this is showing is what our current emissions are, greenhouse gas emissions, the target, what we should reduce by 30%. And then if you have Jingyi, you more than double the emissions. So that's why we're opposing it. So Jen, the artist, did this. What do you think, Jen?
Yeah, I think it's just it's a nice visual to quickly kind of help raise awareness about the importance of keeping our greenhouse gases in check. We absolutely need to work towards reducing them. The city's climate change coordinator has worked out targets for us as far as the 30% drop that Jeff mentioned, and this is what we need to do to address the climate emergency. Every municipality across the globe is working on this type of thing, and we just want to bring some more awareness to obviously opposition to this project because it would more than double the greenhouse gases, but just the facts that we need to be talking about climate change in order to address it, and we certainly want to make council aware that we're not okay with the way that the project has been proposed and tried to skip the democratic process. So.
Stop Jingyi.
Take it away, Jeff.
Okay, evening, folks. Thank you very much. I left the last meeting. I was very, very moved by the call to say, what can we do? And there were talks about driving tractors downtown and what else we could do, because I'm struck by the importance of doing something visual. So I left the meeting, started to talk to some folks, and ended up with Jen, and I'm glad I did. And we did this partly, this idea that you saw the thermometer. You might want to bring that up, making just so people can see what's on the thermometer. Mainly to support the great work the people are doing down at the vigil at City Hall. So we said, what could we do to support what's going on there? And what could we do to try to engage some local businesses? So there are just really 3 numbers on this, and the numbers themselves tell sort of, I would say, a disturbing story. The city emissions, 315,000 metric tons, comes out of Rebecca's good work. And you've heard Anne already talk about how, I'll say, frustrating it is to try to get the city to do something with that. My understanding is the city's going to come forward with a 10% reduction target. I'm not talking Jingy at this point. You'll get it by 2030. You'll get a 10% reduction target by 2030 by virtue of simple displacement of vehicles in our city with electric vehicles. So you could call 10% what I think is designed to do a do-nothing plan. We got a 30% target from the credit to the work that Rebecca did to say that was the consensus. Rebecca did a survey of citizens across the city to say what makes some sense. So the 30% number is where that I'll say a possible target, 30% by 2030. The real target that serious actors are talking about is between 45 and 50% by 2030. The last number, and this to me is somewhat surprising, this comes from Mike Sullivan, who spoke to us earlier. I guess I thought that I would be able to do this, or Jen would help us do this thermometer that said, well, the Jingy plant is X. And it took Mike doing research on a website in China. It took doing some research on greenhouse gas calculations for float glass plants in Europe for us to come to an estimate. And the estimate is somewhere between 400,000 tons and 500,000 tons. And I must say, I mean, sorry to be a bit naive here, I'm shocked that Jingy has proposed a $400 million plant and has not told us what the greenhouse gas emissions are. That makes me wonder what in the world council is considering here. But anyway, that's my side speech. So we've made two of these. Jen made two of these. I carry them down to the vigil every noon every day from 12 to 2. We put the second one in, thank you to the one that owns the Agora Art Gallery. So Mike said that I would do this. I want to ask people if you have other ideas for this. We made two of them. I thought we might take them to porches, that kind of stuff. But frankly, I thought supporting the vigil at City Hall was important. I'd love if anybody on the call has either contacts with or friends of businesses on Market Square. I've talked to a few. I think, frankly, some people are a bit intimidated by this process, and I respect that. I'm not forcing this on anyone, but I'd love to have one of these boards circulate among downtown businesses who also oppose this. I think that Jingy is not only an environmental disaster, it's also an employment disaster. So I think local businesses should be supporting this. We've called the project somewhat tongue-in-cheek, Keep Stratford Cool. Just to follow up on Ann's comment, I think part of what's happened here is we have a council that has declared a climate emergency and then has gone on the next day to do exactly what they've done in the past, which is essentially nothing. It's a profound statement to me that after declaring a climate emergency unanimously last February, the city is on the verge of making a decision, which the first decision related to climate change by more than doubling the emissions of our city. And what that would leave you with if we got to 2030 and the city by some miraculous turn of events got its greenhouse gas emissions to zero, by 2030, because of the Jingy plant, we will still have more emissions at that point than we have today. And I just find that logic profoundly disturbing. So the idea is keep cool Stratford. If you have ideas about downtown businesses or other ideas of where you think these things could be circulated, this is a short-term project. We're trying to do this in time to influence the people that are making the decision. I must say, I've been at the vigil every day this week with the folks down there. They're Leslie and Peggy are doing a wonderful job. They're inspiring, and it's terrific to stand in the corner having the support of people honking horns, what have you. So where should we put these things to have an impact? Mike, back to you.
Thank you, Jeff. You'll see in the mailbox, in the chat box, a couple of suggestions. A couple of people have suggested the Revel Coffee Shop. Somebody suggested the space within, and somebody else is saying a digital version that could go on our social media feed. Somebody else is saying gentle rain. So these are good suggestions. B, I think Jeff is also asking for help here, that if you know somebody there and you can help make the ask, that would be terrific. So Jeff, I'm going to ask you maybe to put your email in the chat box. So if somebody wants to contact you, they can. There's some other suggestions in there. Kevin Silver, for example, is saying the stack would be twice as tall as the Eiffel Tower. What about a sign showing the Eiffel Tower and a smokestack beside it? So there's lots of interesting ideas percolating there. People are showing you love, Jeff. Somebody commented appreciating your 40 years of activism in the big bad world. So please enjoy that and look at those comments. And we're going to go next to Tori Sutton, who's also engaged in a very creative project, which she's calling Let's Show Them Who We Are. So Tori, please turn on your microphone and your video.
I am here. It's too bad that we can't just borrow the space in the Memorial Gardens where the United Way thermometer usually goes, because that would be kind of amazing for that. So yeah, I think we're just going to pull up a screen. I just have a short update. I think most of you who have been on previous community meetings have heard about this project that I am spearheading. And that's a video project that kind of came about after the comments were made by Chris Pigeon of GSP Group, suggesting that the opposition to the project was elitist in nature. And we certainly know that is not the case. So again, the whole purpose is to show City Council and the general public just the diversity of the people who are concerned about this project in our community. I have received an awful lot of submissions, which is fantastic. It's over 70 submissions to date. And I keep kind of pushing back and pushing back and pushing back because they're still coming in. But I have set a deadline of tomorrow night at 8 p.m. So please, if you were considering contributing to this project, if you could get me your files, that would be really appreciated. You can email them to the address on the screen as well. I have set up like a drop where you can just upload your folders or for your files. If you need that link sent to you, just email and I can send it over. Certainly videos are very powerful for this, but if you are not comfortable on video or you don't have the technological skills, I will absolutely accept a photo of yourself with some written thoughts or just your name and your written thoughts, and I will include that in the video. It would be remiss of me if I didn't give a big thank you to Leslie and Peggy for their efforts at City Hall. They have been furiously videotaping people who stop by and sending the videos into me. Leslie is getting awful good at the technology in that iPad. So, you know, their support has been massive and really, really helped with those contributions. But I just wanted to say, you know, a lot of people have expressed interest in contributing to this. And then, of course, you know, we get busy in our lives and you don't send them in. But, you know, especially I would love to see, you know, more younger folks, youth, late teens, 20s, because I know they're out there. Anyone who is on this meeting who, you know, would like to send something in, I would be happy to receive it. I do plan on hopefully doing the hard edit this weekend and having something available, you know, in the coming week, which of course will be forwarded to Get Concerned Stratford and they can release how they feel fit or see fit. But, you know, the one thing I will say is some people have shared rather lengthy thoughts, which, you know, might not be very palatable for social media, you know, watching a 35-minute long video. But no matter what, there will be the entire package submitted to City Council. So if you have submitted multiple videos or a longer video, please know that the file I plan on sending to City Hall will include everyone's thoughts.
Wow, a couple of wows here. First of all, wow for 70 submissions, which I'm sure you're gonna get some more, Tori, after tonight. And wow for you to think this up to herd this thing, to do, spend your time this weekend doing a hard edit. That's terrific. And as somebody just said, thanks, Tori, you're amazing. Great job. There's some more thanks coming towards you. And it's very powerful. Visual images are very powerful. The videos, I'm sure, will have a big impact. The thermometer is having an impact. We're going to talk about the vigil in a minute, which is having an impact. And I see many people making some very clever and creative suggestions in the chat box about stacking Eiffel Towers, stacking smokestacks, etc. And what we really need is people who are going to convert that into something. So if you're able to turn your idea into an image, that's great. And if you're not, but somebody who's watching this, it can do that, that's terrific too. So we'll hope that will happen. We'll watch for that. And if as you do that, there's a way that Get Concerned Stratford can support you in it, please email us at our email address, which someone will put in the mailbox, chat box again right now as we move forward. Now, speaking of showing up, speaking of being visible, Leslie's going to update us on the vigil. I'm going to invite Leslie to come join us now on the microphone. Turn your video on, please.
Video.
There you are. Okay, take it away, Leslie.
Great. Well, the vigil has turned out to be something that's, we're showing a few photos here. This is a young man who stopped by the vigil to chat with us. He's a young worker at one of the factories in Stratford. And he said, you know, the factories that are already in Stratford can't get enough workers as it is. And so any few amounts of questionable jobs that Shinny might bring, there aren't the workers in Stratford anyway. So that was an important point, and he was a great young man to have a chat with. I don't know if you're going to be showing more slides. I can tell you. This is two young women out for a walk on a slightly warmer day with this beautiful little girl. And they didn't know much about what was going on. So we were able to inform them of the dangers of Shinny. And so some of the slides that I've picked tonight are of focusing on young people because it's the future that we're standing and working towards. And the next slide. Two young students, I think they're in like grade 7 or 8, and they didn't know much about this. So we educated them about it, and they are hoping to go and talk to their friends and their families to get involved with this. We do encourage the young people because we need more and more young people to be aware and to be with us on this fight. So this was a wonderful, wonderful experience I had. I was walking, as sometimes I do, walking to City Hall, and I carry my sign in front of me like my shield, I think. So I do often get videos and photos along the way. But this young girl, she's about 5, I think, and her young brother and mother were on their way to the park. And she pointed to my sign. She wanted, you know, to bring attention to the sign. And she already knew at 5 years of age that this sign meant clean water and clean air. She was 5 years old. I was so amazed. So the power of what we're doing in the city, of educating, that sign is absolutely, you know, that's why we use it in the vigil so much, is because it's so recognizable. But here she is 5 and she already knows that it's about clean air and clean water. The next sign, well, our little Alida, she's been coming out in the coldest days. She made her own sign. I think we talked about her last time. We haven't seen her lately because she's in school again. But I spoke with her mother, and her mother was hoping to bring her on Saturday. And I said to be really careful because it's supposed to be really, really cold that day. I don't want little Alida to be hurt. Any other photos that we sent in? Yeah, this is just a view from the top of city steps. One day we had so many vigilers out just to give you an idea of where we stand, and that front area that we stand is actually, it's quite nice because there used to be just a tiny little strip of sunlight at the front that we would try to huddle into. But now as we're moving into February, that patch of sun is getting bigger. But it's a really great place to stand because there are so many streets coming that way that we can aim our signs to the traffic coming. And I do have to say, we have so many wonderful, loyal people that come and stand with us. If I sent a photograph of each one of them, we would be here for a long time. And I just want to say that if you want to come and stand with us, we don't have the sign-up sheet anymore. It was problematic. So just come down. We can be in groups of 5, and we can have a group of 5 at the front, a group of 5 at the back, a group of 5 on the corner. So if you can only stand for 10 or 15 minutes, that's fine. I usually have a couple of extra signs for you to hold, but if you can bring your own, that's great. Dress really warmly. Fingers and toes are really important. And I'm speaking for Peggy Coffee, of course, because we're the 2 hosts of the vigil. We each take an hour to stand. And I guess the power of the vigil, and it was a wonderful sort of human interest hook to get into the Toronto Star article, which we're really grateful to Noor Javid for. But I guess the power of the vigil is personal sacrifice for the common good. And I think that's a thing that we need more and more in our society. Standing consistently there in the cold brings focus and awareness to the issue. But there are so many in this fight. There's so many at Wise Communities and Get Concerned, and all of you who are putting your personal time and effort into this fight. And so I want to honor all the people. It's a community, and that's the light that we have, that we are working together in this fight and then into the climate fight beyond. So yeah, the strength of the community coming together to protect itself. But we're among so many communities right now in this era. As we've heard earlier tonight, we're having to fight the forces of ignorance, and because of the climate emergency, I read that there are citizens in Pond Inlet that are standing on vigil against a mining company. We have the fight against the 413 highway that we, need to support as well, because that road would go across wetlands and special farmland and forests. And of course, because we have so many multiplying MZOs in Ontario, we have to keep aware about all of those and support all the battles that are going on in all the communities. I heard that even there was a pet shelter that's having to close and trying to find places for the cats because this MZO is going to get rid of their lodgings, their building. I just don't know. It's just beyond me, this ignorance. So we have to, fight as a province against these undemocratic MZOs. But all over the earth, there are battles happening. We're deep into the struggle in the climate emergency now. The little village in England that's threatened, a charming little village threatened by a huge truck park. The old growth in BC, the fighting against palm oil in other parts of the world. So we need leaders everywhere. We need heroes everywhere, worldwide, to fight for a healthy climate. So, so today was day 32. Hard to believe. Last time I was here, I think it was day 12. So Monday to Saturday, noon to 2, we welcome anyone. We welcome visitors. We welcome honks. waves, thumbs ups. We're actually getting more and more. Today was a particularly noisy day at City Hall, I think because of the Toronto Star publication. So the vigil does keep a light on this fight right in the heart of our city, right on the steps and in the front of City Hall. And we do get a lot of visitors. We get a lot of people sometimes that have no idea what Shinny is about and what we're standing there for. We have, so we do educate lots of people. We do have flyers. So I noticed there was a question at the side. We do have flyers often, although it's not, we don't sort of have piles of them hanging there because being out in the cold is very difficult. You have to plan how you contain your cameras and your flyers, etc. But we get people asking where to get the signs, and we send them, of course. We got a donation the other day. A man walked up to me with an envelope and said, "Here's my pledge," and there's a donation in it. I took it over to Sharon. It was $50 cash. We post every day about what the vigil has been like. We photograph. Anybody comes to chat, we hand them the sign and take their picture as well as chat with them. But one thing that's kind of interesting is every day, we set out for the vigil and it's surprising every day. It's never the same. One question that we often get, and so, it's a good thing to be at the meeting and get caught up on things, is where are we now? What's happening?
That's what we're talking about next, Leslie.
Pardon me? Sorry?
That's what we're going to talk about right next.
Well, that's excellent because Peggy and I need to be up on that. But but today I met a man who thought that Shinny was a done deal, and we were able to let him know, no, we're still fighting. It's not a done deal. So we videotape as Tori was mentioning. And we have the new greenhouse gas emissions visual, which is great. But one thing about the vigil is it's a time of companionship in this time of lockdown. It's a lovely thing. As Kathy said, it's the best party in town. It's a time of community spirit. In fact, Kathy chose to spend her birthday on vigil with us, which was very moving. Today, we also get suggestions from people as well as questions. And today, Peggy had a really important discussion with a retired public health nurse from Toronto, who was wondering if the Huron-Perth Public Health had been consulted at all with the effects of what Shinny might bring to our community, especially in terms of in the era of a pandemic. With the increase of the foreign workers that would be coming in and the truck drivers, etc. So she was very concerned about that and wondering if public health had been consulted. There was also a young woman of 21 who just did not want to give any of her taxes to the $6 million Shinny water and sewage infrastructure money. She really, really wanted to improve housing options for people in the city, but she promised that she would get her friends involved. And today I had concerns from a citizen who was very worried, very concerned about the conflict of interest from the fact that many of the councillors and some of the City Hall staff are both on the board of Invest Stratford and on council or working with council. And he really wanted to know if this was a conflict of interest that should be investigated. So I guess just to, well, I want to give a really, really big shout out and thank you to all those people who come and join us. Every day, Bob arrives and there he's my companion. Oh, and another thing that happened the other day was I was by myself and a man in a van across the street said to be careful because there was a man with issues wandering around there were several police cars at the time. And so he drove off and he immediately drove back and he says, I want to be here to make sure you're okay.
Lovely.
And then he came over to see me and we did a video and he said, hi, my name's Joe. And I say no. So thank you, Joe, if you happen to be here. So all those loyal citizens who stand with us, my heart, you've got my heart. And we love chatting and catching up on things too. So we're getting more and more honks from buses, hydro trucks, taxis, postal workers, Purelator drivers, police. I even had thumbs up and waves from a big city truck today with city workers in it. So I thought that was pretty good. So even if, sorry.
This is very heartwarming, Leslie. And I'm just hoping that all that cold time you've spent in the cold, that this has warmed you up from that and will sustain you and others as you keep going forward.
Oh, we're putting on the gas now. We're not stopping. So we'd love to have more people and have more groups, you know, at various points in the city. And I guess one thing that this has made me think about, and Peggy too, I know, is about the need in this time of age. Service above self is what Rotary says. And as I started out with, the vigil is personal sacrifice for the common good. We need candidates of integrity to run for office. Candidates that really represent the people, that put the common good first and not just their narrow personal interests. And I'm so happy to that the vigil, Peggy and I just kind of said way back when in early January, well, let's just start. And 32 days later, I'm just glad that we've been effective.
You've been very effective. You've been very effective, Leslie, and I hope you can see in the chat box the love and appreciation for you and Peggy and everyone who's joining you, Manfred and others, and the work that you're doing. It is, and I think it's just, you're speaking a lot of wisdom to us, and that the sacrifice that you're making is being noticed and is having an impact. So thank you very much, and to thank you to everybody on the call who's been there. And if you're thinking about going and joining them, I think in the next week or so, the next couple of weeks, be a very important time to do that. Is it okay, Leslie, if I switch now into kind of where we go next? Yeah, okay. So this is a long way back to a question that was asked at the very beginning, kind of where do we go from here? And I'd just like to make in terms of next steps, I'd like to make a couple of comments. The first is, just starting with what Leslie said, the videos Tori's doing, the signs that Jeff is making, the work that Emily and Anne are doing on climate issues, the lawn signs, the incredible numbers of people who are showing up at these meetings, your persistent outreach and contact, which we hear is ongoing to the mayor and councilors. And thank you for sharing with us what you're hearing in those conversations. It's clear that there's broad, deep, growing opposition to the glass plant. And the issue has been put on pause, and we're asked what's going to happen next. Well, we don't know what's going to happen next, but really there are three possible scenarios. And I'd like to describe them very briefly to you. I'm summarizing for you what the Get Concerned Steering Committee has discussed, and then use it as a way to answer the question, how do we find our way out of this? So there's really three possibilities. One possibility is that the city council, the mayor and council, decide to subject the glass plant to a full public planning process under the Planning Act. That would effectively set aside the MZO. We've asked for the city to request that the MZO be canceled, but that would effectively stop the MZO, render it useless, and then begin a full public consultation process. We're not advocating for that. We're saying that's one scenario that could happen. If that does happen, we're looking at potentially months of activity, potentially somebody, either Jingyi or the community, taking this as an appeal to the local planning appeals tribunal. That would be a long, drawn out process, but that's one scenario. And it would be a fully public process. The second scenario is that the council, that a majority of council, despite the opposition of the community, approves the agreement and forces the project on the community. And if that was to happen, then the consequence for that has to be lasting political consequences for anybody who supports that proposal. Any councillor who votes in favor of Jigny, if it passes, has got to face lasting political consequences, and the community has got to organize to make them feel that. The third option, and it's the option I think that we probably all would prefer, is an immediate exit from this proposal, either by the expiration of some kind of agreement or by the council simply refusing to enter a cost sharing and site plan agreement and saying no. Now, we don't have control over those three scenarios because you are not the decision makers, the council are the decision makers. But here's a story I tell to every community that I work with in the campaign work that we do. And I use the metaphor of a house on fire. Our job is to put the political house of the mayor and council on fire. And if we put it on fire, they'll find their way out. They've got a couple of ways out of this, and they'll find their way out if we put their house on fire. What I want to suggest to you as a person from out of town watching what you've done, their house is on fire. They've had to put this thing on pause and they're thinking about what to do next. And what does that mean, what we have to do? Our task is to, I'm going to mix my metaphors here, forgive me. What we have to do is keep the pot boiling. We have not stopped. We mean in the broadest sense, the community has not stopped. The research has gone on. We've unearthed more letters today. There are continuing investigations. There's continuing freedom of information requests. There's a continuing investigation by the quote unquote closed meeting investigator. Wise Communities is working very hard doing research and driving the issue. There's increasing visible public opposition, the vigil, Jeff's signs, the videos that are going to come out soon, the new ideas that you have that are emerging and that we're going to continue to push on, the ideas you have about signs and images, and as the lockdown, hopefully, as the pandemic eases and the restrictions ease, then we're going to be able to gather more in public. Lorena and Wise Communities are making plans to resume their rallies on February 22nd. The media is only going to increase. So our work is to, as Susan Little says in the chat box, to continue fanning the flames or to keep the pot boiling. We cannot go to sleep. You know, all these metaphors are different. We have to keep our foot on the gas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we're doing. We will convene another one of these meetings soon. We set the dates for these meetings based on events. We're still waiting for a letter back from the city in response to that from our lawyer. We'll convene a meeting when we have that and when we have other news. But what's really important is to keep the pressure on. So if you are calling councillors, if you're calling the mayor, if you're talking to other people, if you hear things, please contact us through the email box. Contact Sharon Collingwood, who's a key person who's coordinated that information. We need to keep the pressure on. We forgot to mention that Tori's doing another lovely piece of work. She's created a short video which can be shared with people who visit Stratford, and how people who are visitors to Stratford can send a message to the mayor and councillor. And I think we're going to be releasing that next week as well to coincide with the other videos that are coming out. So the important thing is to keep the pressure on. Another question that Tom, I think, or maybe I got the name right, I'm not sure, asked was, should we join forces with other groups? And they've, in the chat box has been mentioned, pardon me, an MZO in the Holland Marsh, one in Barrie. They may be different, they may be the same. The one in Pickering around the wetlands, the one around the warehouse demo in Toronto. should we join forces with those other groups? Well, what I'd like to ask you to do is put comments in the chat box, whether you think we should connect with those, whether Get Concerned Stratford as a leadership group should reach out to some of those people and make some contacts. We have to keep very focused on the glass plant here. And as Anne Carbert said early in the evening, and which was very important, it's the glass plant now, and then the local climate change plan in a continuing way, that one builds towards the other. So we're going to stay focused on the glass plant. We're going to keep our eyes on the prize, but in a way that work is not done. It's the beginning of ongoing work. So in response to the question from somebody who asked earlier, should we join forces? Please put your comments in the chat box. Now, we're just about ready to wrap up, and in a moment, we're going to ask Melissa to close, I think. Sharon Collingwood had prepared some background on the history of Stratford having these kinds of fights and how this is in your tradition to stand up for the community. Sharon, I'm just kind of talking to you. I know you had presented kind of a lengthy thing, and I'm not sure how long it was, and I kind of want to ask the audience if they want to hear that now, if they've got time and interest for it. How long were you planning on doing your presentation, Sharon?
Oh, it's no more than 10 minutes, I guess.
Folks, have you got, I'm going to say, we got 10 minutes? Yes, sure. Michelle,
why not?
okay.
Why not?
So let's go for it. I think it's actually important, Sharon. I think it's an important heritage, an important aspect of the community's experience and power. So so go for it. So go for it, Sharon.
Okay. Am I on? Can you?
You're on. We can see you and we can hear you.
Okay. And now can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Well, we're going. So I just did a short thing on Stratford, and it, for me, this whole thing began with the water. The water was the thing I couldn't wrap my head around, that people would want to douse molten glass with drinking water. And when I think about the center of our community is water. We go where do we recreate? We go down there, we walk, we bike around our water. We love our water. And so that's where I began, the idea that water is the center of our community. And I got to thinking, actually, Peggy Coffey sent me this. I thought this was a really handy thing to talk about. This is, you probably know the book, The Flood Tides of Fortune. And she clipped out for me this little passage. The Citizens Committee wrote a masterly bit. Oh, I should actually say, for those of you who don't know, they wanted to build, a rail yard down there. They wanted to destroy that area. We would never have gotten it back. And a group like our group got together and they said, no, this is not going to happen. And they worked and they made sure that it didn't happen. And this is a quote from that chapter. The Citizens Committee wrote a masterly bit of copy to go with that emotional picture. And this picture really hit home. And that's one of the things I want to talk about, is how pictures and images hit home. Try to imagine what the South Shore about the Long Bridge would look like when turned into a freight yard. That's one of the sentences. The other one is, don't be frightened by the threats of the big stick. Be on your guard against the Ruhrbacks. The committee was fighting the most powerful railway in the world. And I think that's really rings true to us when you think that that's a $400 million plant they want to build there. That is a lot of power and a lot of money we're facing against. I remember when we started this campaign, I was absolutely petrified. But look at how far we've come. And I did want to mention the Ruhrbacks. I think this is so funny, and Peggy mentioned this too in her mail. The Ruhrback, it's a word that we've lost now. I mean, at the time this was written, at the turn of the century, they knew what a Ruhrback was. Apparently, during the campaign of the American president, James Polk, someone wrote this fake biographical journal that was against Polk. It was a political stunt. And it was called the journey of Baron Ruhrbeck. And that's where that comes from. And I think that's so similar to what we face here, is not just the big stick, but a Trumpy big stick, a big stick that relies on lies and fake news, and what goes around comes around. So I thought that was a really nice thing to think about when you think about our community. And we're not just a bunch of racist NIMBYs. We're following in the tradition of the community. And another thing that I was going to say was, remember, and I think everyone knows that in the 50s, they wanted to rip this building down to make a hotel. And a whole bunch of people said, no, you're not going to do that. And they won too. And I think there must have been a lot of powerful people who wanted that hotel to be built. And when you look at that, talk about pictures and symbols and what they mean to us. Look at that building. What does that mean to us? That means our heritage, our past, our history. It's really important to us. But one thing that has come to me since I've been in this campaign, and actually it just makes me really choke up, is I'm really taking democracy seriously. This building means the democratic process. This is our democratic process, our local democratic process, and it's really important to us. And I've never seen anything like it since I've been in this campaign. People on the doorstep, people on the phone, people on the email, and they're all working together for positive change. And that's just the most uplifting thing I've ever seen, quite frankly. And then there's this person in this picture in another country that we're not supposed to be naming would be in jail, if not worse, for what she's doing. Let's remember that. Democracy is a beautiful thing. So here are the lands. That's another symbol. It's a very Ontario symbol, right? No hills. We have no hills here. And you might say, well, it's just a cornfield, and but it too is part of our history. It's also provides us with what we eat. If you think about, I don't know if you saw the publicity around the Ontario Federation of Agriculture's letter over the MZOs and the way they are decimating our agricultural land. It's being reduced at a phenomenal rate because of these MZOs. And this is what we're losing. This is an image. It's a very pastoral image, but that's our history. And you take that image. Now, this is Al Hamburg made this up, and I can't say that it's, that it's true to life or anything, or that it shows the right dimensions or anything. But I think it has a symbolic importance to look at that and to see, how would you feel? How are you going to feel if those stacks go up? And that is the correct direction of the prevailing wind. And that is how big it is. It's huge. It's a monster. Look at the top there. Look where the city is. Look at that monstrous big red bit. And they're saying all of these jobs. Well, I'd like to know how many jobs per acre. I would like somebody to calculate for me how many jobs per acre in this picture. And then there's this. Now, I do a lot of the publicity and a lot of the pictures and for the campaign. And I have studiously avoided bringing this subject up. Because when you look at this picture, yeah, okay, this is a company that came and dumped all sorts of crap on us, and now we're stuck with it, and this is what Shinyi could do to us. Yeah, I'm quite aware of that. But I'm also quite aware that this was quite an undertaking. This is a point of community pride. I'm not dumping on that site because, they did a lot. That's really something what they accomplished. So I guess my final point is, how do we look at all of this? We've seen the other groups, and yes, they've won. And what we're doing today is thinking, well, where are we going with this? When Melissa went and talked on the radio, it was just a couple of days ago, she talked to a radio station in Kitchener. She had a really nice talk with him. And after, he said, well, this is all very well and good, but I don't know how I can deal with this because, I believe in progress and I believe in growth, but at the same time, I don't want to see nature hurt. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's a problem for you because you're not using the right words. What does growth mean to you? What is growth? how do we grow? I mean, isn't it better to think of intelligent ways of do we have to grow? I question your parameters. And I think that this is, for this town, this is where we are. There are people saying, oh, well, you need growth, you need jobs. And then there are other people saying, yeah, I mean, is there not a different parameter of building our town? Is there not a way of listening to what our town needs rather than imposing some false symbol of growth on it? Well, I don't know. But I think that's the crux of where we are. We're looking to the past, and we're not too sure about the future, but I think the future is questioning some of the parameters, some of the things that we've inherited. We need new ways to envision the future. And I guess that's my little historical thing.
Thank you so much, Sharon. That was fantastic. I love the idea that a group like us can make such a difference. And on those issues, it's just fantastic. I think it's very encouraging. I know the world that we're in right now, sitting at home and just thinking about all of what's going on here with all of these issues and doing the research, it can be so overwhelming. And I find that these meetings give me hope, and bringing us all together is such an important part of that. And I just want to thank everybody so much for being here tonight. Thanks to everyone who spoke, and for everyone who's putting in efforts: Leslie, Peggy, Jeff and Jen, Tori, and all the video work. I can't wait to see when that all comes out. I hope that everyone will sign up for the Climate Momentum workshop next week. And we'll see everybody there, and we'll keep plugging away and just stay positive. I say it every single week. It's not a done deal, and I think we're making a difference, and I think we are being heard. So thank you to everyone, and have a great night.